Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back and happy VE Day. On this day, May 8th, 1945, at around 10 p.m., the unconditional surrender of Germany was to take place at 23:01 on the 8th of May, 1945. Now, in the West, it's celebrated on the 8th because of the local time. So at this point in North America, it would have been 6 hours behind, or, depending on which part you're there. And on the Soviet side, it's celebrated on the 9th because it was signed in the early hours of the morning by Keitel on that day. So 78 years ago, crazy to think that that was 78 years and still the impact, and we're still talking about it today. And I'm talking about it with you guys right now. And to celebrate that day, I wanted to take a look at this video, The Sounds of War, Voices of World War II Leaders. Now, this is a long video, and I'll probably do a little bit of cutting in between here and there. But this goes through almost every single leader. I'm pretty sure it's every single leader. I had a look at the timestamps before of the Second World War, some that you might not have even thought of. So this is going to be a bit of a longer one, but I wanted to have a look at this and see how the people sounded like, because this is not something that you really think of. I mean, maybe you've heard maybe you've heard a speech from Churchill or from Roosevelt, but what did Mussolini sound like? How did the Prime Minister of Canada, Sir William Lyon Mackenzie King, how did he sound like? So without further ado, let's take a look at this one. Timestamps will be down below. Hope you'll join me for the whole thing. If you haven't already yet, please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Let's get into it. Oh, and let's turn it all the way up.
Stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us.
Okay, that is exactly that I thought Neville Chamberlain would sound. So Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister before Churchill, and again, I won't do a long explanation of all of these. There's a lot of leaders. So the Prime Minister before Churchill became Prime Minister, famous for his appeasement policies. He said famously, "There is peace in our time," after securing the Munich Agreement, which annexed the Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia to the Nazis, and then they just went ahead and annexed it anyways. So he further resigned, but he was actually an important part of the war cabinet, and he didn't resign in shame and then, retire or whatnot. He stuck on throughout the war.
Is at war with Germany.
When Napoleon lay at Boulogne for a year
there you go.
with his flat-bottom
Of course
boats
they'll use it.
and his grand army, he was told by someone, "There are bitter weeds in England." There are certainly a great many more of them.
I was not expecting this.
Expeditionary force returned. Sir, I have myself full confidence that if all do their duty, if nothing is neglected, and if the best arrangements are made, as they are being made, we shall prove ourselves once more able to defend our island home, to ride out the storm of war, and to outlive the menace of tyranny,
There you go.
if necessary, for years.
So Winston Churchill, right, probably one of the most famous figures of World War II. So this speech is "We shall fight them on the beaches," as it's colloquially known. The victory, though it might be a long road ahead, shall be achieved, or something along those lines at the end. And it was actually recorded way after the war. The original speech was never recorded. The BBC actually read excerpts of it, so because this was a speech given in the House of Commons, and the House of Commons wasn't being recorded at this time. And so I think this was in maybe 48 or 49 that he recorded this afterwards. So this is him just reading a piece of paper of what he actually wrote, not a live speech, as some people might mistakenly think it was. I think they put the whole speech in here. Yeah, I did put the whole speech in here. So I won't listen to the whole thing. Let's just listen to a few more seconds, and I'll skip over to the next one.
If necessary, alone.
I love his intonation.
At any rate, that is what we're going to try to do.
At any rate, that's what we're going to try to do.
That is the resolve of His Majesty's government, every man of them. That is the will of Parliament and the nation. The British Empire and the French Republic, linked together in their cause and in their need, will defend to the death their native soil, aiding each other like good comrades to the utmost of their strength.
And so to think, too, that France and Britain for the longest time were just natural enemies, right? There was no greater adversary to continental Europe from Britain's point of view than France, right? France was the ruler of the continent, Britain was the ruler of the seas on her island and obviously amassed a large empire. And so as, relations eventually thawed, and then the First World War was really a big turning point of where these two nations were completely allied with each other. And so the speech when this was taking place, France had just fallen. This was in a period of 5 weeks between the capitulation of France and what Britain was going to do at this point, because Britain and her empire, as well as Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa at this point, British Raj or India, it's kind of like, what is the British Empire going to do? They're alone now, right? They really have no other allies on the continent. It's all been conquered. And so I think it was Churchill gave 3 speeches, I believe, as well as the one that I only have to offer you, Blood, Toil, Sweat, and Tears. That's another very famous one. And so, this is a really high point of tension and what was going to happen with Britain. There were some elements that were led, well, not exactly led, but that had a figurehead in Lord Halifax that wanted to make peace with the Germans. But Churchill at this point really comes into his own. Before, he was a bit of a backbencher, bit of an odd one in the Conservative Party, and becomes the leader that we would all come to know.
We shall go.
So that's that one. Let's skip ahead to Clement Attlee, who was this is another interesting one. So that during the Yalta Conference in 1945, was it 1944? And either 1944 or 1945. It's a famous one because there's Stalin, Roosevelt, and then there's Attlee. And most people would think that Churchill would be there, but he was not. And I might be getting that conference wrong. It might not have been Yalta. It might have been in Tehran. But either way, one of the 2 famous conferences that was held between all the allies. Clement Attlee was there because Winston Churchill was defeated in an election shortly after the war. And Clement Attlee then led the Labour Party to the sort of revolution, so to say, the Social Democratic Revolution in Britain, until Churchill was brought in again after Attlee for one more term.
He alone of all the nations went through 2 great wars.
Also sounds exactly like I thought he would.
For that fight, we put everything in that we had. We sacrificed
sort of like soft Gentile type thing, intellectual.
We converted all our industry. And that is why we are left in this position today.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live
in infamy.
In infamy.
Yes. So this is going to be a long video. The date that will live in infamy. This was the attack on Pearl Harbor. I'll leave this all for another video, I think, because every single event I could talk about, and this could be like a 2-hour-long video. But how does he do that? Like that 40, right? That like in 1941, like what is that accent? I don't know if that accent really exists anymore. I think it's the transatlantic accent. I think that's what it's called, but I don't know. It's like, it's almost a little Kennedy-like too, and Kennedy obviously having a more Massachusetts accent, but kind of cool.
The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking
like emperor instead of like emperor, right? That's sort of, it's like emperor. It's like that bravado. I love that.
Toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific.
What has already happened to Tokyo will happen to every Japanese city whose industries feed the Japanese war machine.
I've never heard true.
Japanese insist on continuing resistance beyond the point of reason, their country will suffer the same destruction as Germany. Our blows will destroy their whole modern industrial plant and organization, which they have built up during the past century, and which they are now devoting to a hopeless cause.
He's also kind of got a bit of that old-timey accent, right? But it's not as much of that. I think it's called transatlantic, if I am right, as Roosevelt there. But if anyone knows any more about this, put it down below. I'm curious.
No desire or intention to destroy or enslave the Japanese people, but only surrender can prevent the kind of ruin which they have seen come to Germany as a result of continued useless resistance.
Пусть в этой войне вдохновляет вас мужественный образ наших великих предков. Александра Невского, Дмитрия Донского, Кузьмы Минина, Дмитрия Пожарского, Александра Суворова, Михаила Кутузова.
I was not expecting that voice from Stalin. What? It's like, because he was born in Georgia, right? So he has a Georgian accent. I don't know anything about Russian accents, unfortunately. So that's as far as I know. But he's like soft-spoken almost, no?
Пусть осенит вас непобедимое знамя великого Ленина.
Like he almost sounds like kind of friendly.
Разгром немецких захватчиков. Смерть немецким оккупантам. Да здравствует наша славная Родина, ее свобода, ее независимость. Под знаменем Ленина вперед!
Ne vous souciez pas des noms.
Charles de Gaulle is the leader of Free France. This guy was massive. I think he was like 6'4", right? Which I think that's above 2 meters. I think he was either 2 meters or he was taller than 2 meters. This guy was ginormous. Huge. He towered over people. Look at photos of him with like other politicians at the time. He towers over them.
Ni des formules. Une seule chose compte.
That's about
Le
appropriate.
salut de la patrie. Tous ceux qui ont le courage de se remettre debout malgré l'ennemi et la trahison sont d'avance
It's a very fitting voice, I
approuvés,
think.
accueillis, acclamés par tous les Français combattants.
中国国民革命呢是要求我们
What? Okay, I guess that was Chiang Kai-shek, I guess. Yeah, would go on to become the leader of Taiwan. Unfortunately lost in the Civil War against the communists led by Mao Zedong. And now we have the modern issue of Taiwan and China. Not every nation recognizes Taiwan as the real China. Some nations did not recognize communist China as the real China, only recognize Taiwan. Yeah, we'll go from there.
中国独立、自由、平等来实现我们生存里的三民主义。The object of this revolutionary movement is to carry out the principles enunciated by our great leader, Dr. Sun Yat-sen, known as the Three People's Principles. 三民主义呢，就是要使得民族独立、民权平等、民生自由。The three principles are that the people will have power to govern themselves, the right to live for themselves, and the meaning of getting a livelihood for the people.
Chiang Kai-shek is an interesting character in that I'll save it for another video, but it's not a very clear morality-wise. He's not a very clear picture. I'll put it that way.
The free nations.
Yes. So William Lyon Mackenzie King, the Prime Minister of Canada, the longest-serving Prime Minister of Canada. I think he was in power for. So this isn't actually truly accurate here. He's served even more terms before and afterwards. Generally remembered as one of probably the best Prime Minister we've ever had. Some people would say Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Fair enough. But yeah, very, very important figure. Was one of the most important figures for leading Canada to not really have its independence in the same way that Americans talk about independence, but to be free to pursue its own foreign affairs, which in this case really meant more independence.
The world can never forget.
He was also really into the occult. Interesting character. I'm going to guess like that sort of upper high class quasi-British accent.
Yeah. It was the indomitable resistance of the people of Britain
Yep.
bought the precious time for the mobilization of the forces of freedom around the globe.
Yep.
It is, however, not of Britain but of Canada that I am expected to speak on this occasion. I place first the aspect I regard as most significant. Canada's war effort is a voluntary effort. It is the free expression of a free people.
So, as I was talking about with being able to choose their own foreign policy, which is what was secured under William Lyon Mackenzie King, when the Second World War started, Unlike the dominions of the British Empire, right? Or I'm not getting those exact terms right, but practically Canada was not forced to join the war. They did not have to join the war. But 4 days later, Canada declared war on Germany as well. And so this was Canada willingly choosing to bring itself into the war, which is really important because in World War I, we were automatically put into the war. This bred some tensions with the Quebecois, so the French-speaking peoples of Canada. And so, yeah, for them to willingly join World War II was a big step for our nation.
Our first duty is to win the war. But to win the war, we must keep the vision of a better future. We must never cease to strive for its fulfillment. No lesser vision will suffice to give the victory over those who seek world domination and human enslavement. No lesser vision will enable us fittingly to honor the memory of the men and women who are giving their all for freedom and justice. In the realization of this vision, the governments and peoples who owe a common allegiance to the Crown may well find the new meaning and significance of the British Commonwealth and Empire. It is for us to make of our association of free British nations a model of what we hope the whole world will someday become.
Well then, Thompson, when you asked for special items of equipment from the base which weren't on the program, they all came out by
Archibald. Is this the leader of South Africa?
They're all right today?
Yes, sir. The base hadn't got any particular...
Yeah, you know what? Give me 1 second. Okay, so from what I've learned, this was actually the Viceroy of India. Basically, he was put in charge of the Indian Armed Forces, which was really bad timing because then Japan would go and declare war on the UK. And eventually he became the Viceroy of India, though at this point, as Indian independence was more and more pushed along, Clement Attlee eventually lost faith in him and he was replaced. And yeah, that was pretty much what I've learned in the 30 seconds it took to get back to this video. As for voice-wise, I'm going to go with posh, British, typical, officer type accent. Let's find out.
Always managed to get it within 24 hours, sometimes using special planes to go and get them. And the RAF, as soon as they were loaded, flew them over Burma any time of the day or night.
Good. RAF did a wonderful job of work over there. Well then...
Okay, never mind.
Taking the expedition fully justified itself, didn't it? And it shows that we can take on the Japanese with ordinary, well-trained troops in that sort of country and be just as good and better than they are, and just with an ordinary British battalion. Don't you agree?
Very definitely, sir.
He kind of sounded like my grandfather. My grandfather's from Manchester, and so was my father. My father was born there. And maybe he was from that area then, because my whole family, they all were born in that area. So when I grew up around a lot of people with British accents, obviously. And yeah, who knows, maybe he's from that region. Kind of sounds like him. Let's keep going.
Men and women.
Australia. Okay, so I'm going to guess John Curtin, so one of the more famous Australian prime ministers, wartime prime minister. I think he led for way longer than 41 to 45, but I could be wrong. You can play him in Civ 6, and the Australian theatre of war is one that doesn't really get covered that much. I mean, the Pacific theatre overall, but the fighting that was taking place in modern Papua New Guinea, brutal jungle fighting, and yeah, it's cool to actually learn about what the Australian forces did during the Second World War. As for voice-wise, I'm going to say he'll definitely have an Australian accent, but I think there'll be that little touches of the British accent that's still in there. Let's find out.
Of Australia.
Okay, very Australian. All
We
right.
are at war with Japan. That has happened because in the first instance, Japanese naval and air forces launched an unprovoked attack on British and United States territory.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
our
More
vital
Australian.
interests are imperiled, and because the rights of free people in the whole Pacific are assailed.
Yeah, that's...
As a result, the Australian government this afternoon took the necessary steps
which will mean that a state of war exists between Australia and Japan.
Okay. Yeah, sounds about right. New Zealand, 1935. Okay, so it looks like we're going to get two leaders here. Kiwi accent is hard for me to even pick up when I talk to New Zealanders, so I got no hope for this one. Let's find out.
Both with gratitude for the past and with confidence in the future.
Okay, that's really, really bad audio. Let's listen to like 10 more seconds and then let's move on.
We range ourselves without fear beside Britain. Where she goes, we go. Where she stands, we stand.
Okay, yep, that's Kiwi. All right, next leader of Australia.
Common destiny.
So this one's Peter Fraser.
I visited the devastated areas in London, and somebody said to me, "You're certainly seen the city at its worst." I said yes.
That's got to be like typical New Zealand accent, because I cannot place that at all. That's such a weird accent. I love it.
I'm seeing the city at its worst and the people at their best.
One occasionally...
Ah, yes. Oh, now we're hitting some spicy figures. Leader of South Africa. Don't know much about him as an individual, but yeah, it was an interesting politics, let's say that the least.
Here's idle words about the decay of this country.
Not what I was expecting from a guy that looks like this, though.
About the approaching breakup of the great group which we form. What folly and ignorance. What misreading of the real signs of the times. In some quarters, what wishful thinking.
The guy who made this video loves Winston Churchill.
Let the enemy say, Gott strafe England. God bless England has been the response from the victims of this most fiendish onslaught in history.
It's a very... Is that typical South... Oh.
I'm looking forward to forthcoming conferences, because there's no doubt...
I don't know what country this is. I gotta be real with you guys. I'm sorry.
If the old country really cooperates with our Commonwealth and Empire, we can do anything we like, and we needn't worry particularly about anybody else.
Okay. Cool. Vargas, yes, so not very often mentioned unless you're a Hoi 4 player. Brazil was in the Second World War. It was joined right at the last minute. It was really a play for Vargas to boost his popularity in Brazil. And I believe that the Brazilians fought in the Italian front. So they fought against the Italians in the Mediterranean. From what I've read, they were incredibly successful. They were incredibly courageous people that were very successful in battle. And although that there was that initial popularity, I believe that Vargas, I think he might have actually been... I don't remember if he was killed, actually. He may possibly, but anyways, he lost power near the end of the war. His strategy didn't really work out. As for voice, I'm gonna go with sort of that middle of the line thing. I don't think he's gonna have a deeper voice. I'm gonna say middle of the line.
Da Aliança Liberal e as afirmativas do discurso de posse do chefe do governo provisório em 13 de novembro de 30 foram ultrapassadas, pois conseguimos organizar o trabalho nacional segundo os princípios cristãos da justiça social, sem abalos econômicos.
Cool. True. Leader of Mexico as well. Also participated in the Second World War. Don't know much about him, though, as an individual. I'm going to go he's got a bit of a deeper voice. Let's find out.
Un pueblo libre y deseoso de mantener sin mancha su ejecutoria cívica no tiene más que un recurso de aceptar valientemente las realidades y declarar, según lo propuso el Consejo de Secretarios de Estado y de Jefes de Departamentos Autónomos reunido en esta capital el viernes 22 del corriente, que a partir de esa fecha existe un estado de guerra entre nuestro país, Alemania, Italia y Japón.
Okay. Mongolia. Okay, wow. I was not expecting that one. Fascinating. So at this point, Mongolia was a Soviet state? Was it a Soviet state? I think it was. I think Mongolia at this point was a Soviet state. I don't believe it was independent. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know anything about this gentleman here, but let's find out what he sounds like. Oh, this is him way older. Yeah, look at all those medals. That's Soviet as hell. Occupied nations. Okay, so I guess they're gonna go with Poland, Balkans, Netherlands, Belgium, Greece. Any ones I'm forgetting? Norway.
Pierwszy to raz obchodzimy imieniny naszego wielkiego marszałka Józefa Piłsudskiego.
Oh, that fits it. Look at this, Jim. Oh, look at that.
Kiedy odszedł już na zawsze, osieracając cały naród polski. Ja, który miałem szczęście patrzenia z bliska przez 41 lat na działalność Piłsudskiego dla Polski, musiałem dojść do przekonania, że tak wielkiej postaci Polska jeszcze nie miała.
Polska. Yeah. That sounds about right. No, this is going to be in English. So Benes, so this was a leader of Czechoslovakia. I'll try and say this properly. One of the few nations to actually escape the authoritarianism of the 1920s and 1930s and actually established strong democratic ties, and it is an absolute sin when you think of the history of the Munich Agreement. Absolutely. I mean, it's debated on whether it was necessary. I personally don't think it was, just from my own opinion, no, whatever. But yeah, Czechoslovakia could have been a very, very strong ally, and Benes would have been a reason for that.
Because of its moral disintegration.
Also, perfectly. That is perfect voice for matching that. It's interesting.
Its political brutality, the slavery which it imposes, its internal and external policy, which so deeply offend all feelings of human decency, because of all that it has perpetrated in Central Europe, will fall and will be replaced by a free, democratic rule in Germany and in Central Europe as a whole.
I wish that actually had happened. Håkon the 7th of Norway. Interesting. Okay, I've never. Oh, old Norwegian. Man, this is going to sound kind of Danish. Let's find out.
Kære landsmænd, denne dag har været den dag, og både jeg og regeringen så frem til den 9. april.
Dude, you sound Norwegian to me.
Fik vi valget om at stå som grundlovens forsvarer eller ophøje os.
Okay, was not expecting that one. So Christian the 10th of Denmark. So we actually stayed in Denmark during the entire occupation. The monarchy did not flee. Parliament was still allowed to meet. And Denmark actually had probably the lightest, if human suffering is human suffering, but the lightest of the occupations, and a lot of civil liberties were actually allowed to continue under the German occupation, which Denmark was famously captured in 6 hours. So you would have went to sleep in Denmark and woken up in occupied Denmark.
Danske mænd og kvinder. Den tyske besættelses tunge år er hævet, og med dyb taknemmelighed og glæde hilser vi dig.
There's something about the voice. Maybe it's the technology at the time, but they all sort of sound a little similar. They sort of have that, I don't know, just that kind of vibe. I don't know how to explain it.
De allierede magter. Vi kan nu andre frit hejse vores gamle flag, og selv tage vare på vores egne forhold.
Today we have to admit
Queen Wilhelmina, yep.
that no happiness can be expected.
So led during the First World War and the Second World War, to die very late in age too.
In this world, if those who are solely responsible for the present situation are not definitively checked in their course of unscrupulous distraction and utter disregard of
That was almost a
law
little German, actually.
and the most elementary principles of morality. I pray God that our allied cause be blessed and that the dawn of the day when freedom will be restored to the Netherlands and to all other victims of German aggression be near.
Fantastic. And the one, man, Dutch people can speak such amazing English even back then. But two is that the liberation of the Netherlands was largely actually a Canadian affair. The Canadian divisions had to push up north and free the Netherlands from the German occupation. And even to this year, the Netherlands actually sends tulips to the Canadian government in thanks for this event. And her accent actually was a little German there. I'd imagine that she probably learned German when she was a kid, given that I believe, I don't remember the familial ties, but probably learned German as a kid, and then also sounds a little French too, so probably speaks multiple languages. Now we're getting spicy too. That was he said like 8 words and then it was just the crowd. Okay, I have no okay, sure Leopold. Grand Duchess of Luxembourg. Yeah.
Armies and your soldiers have been more than good fighters, and I know that the people of Luxembourg receives them with their whole heart.
It sounds like sped up or
In
something.
the last war, the arrival of the American soldiers meant to us the return of freedom and independence. We want America to know that although our country is small, our gratitude is great.
እኔ ቀዳማዊ ኃይለ ሥላሴ የኢትዮጵያ ንጉሠ ነገሥት
Cool.
የዛሬ 8 ወር
That's cool. Yeah. So Jah here, right? So Halas, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. The king of Ethiopia, revered by Rastafarians to be God himself, right? One of the reincarnations of him, and so he's considered one of the Messiah type figure in the Rastafarian religion. Anyways, he was eventually assassinated in 1974 and overthrown. And there's an urban legend that he was actually buried. I can't remember the dictator that came after him. It was a communist type dictator, that he was actually buried underneath there, and like underneath the new dictator's desk, so the new dictator could tell that he wouldn't rise from the dead because he was revered as a god. So that's cool that they put him in this video too.
አምሳ መንግስታት የዓለምን መንግስታት ህግ የተላለፈ
He sounds very modern actually.
ያቂነት ጦርነት መደረጉን ምክንያቱም ወታደሮቹ ቦምቡ በወደቀ ጊዜ ጋዙን ነፋስ እስኪወስደው ድረስ መበታተኑን ስላወቁበት ነው። ዘራቸውንም ለማጥፋት አደጋ እየጣለ ወጋቸው።
Φαίνινες.
Ah yes, George II of Greece.
Παρήλθον ήδη 5 μήνες αφότου υπό την πίεση μιας απροκλήτου και βαρβάρου υλικής βίας, η οποία έριψεν εις το σκόπος της προσωρινής βανάσκου εχθρικής κατοχής την αγαπητή μας πατρίδα, απεχωρήσαμεν.
I think you're happy to be here, Peter, aren't you?
Ah yes, Peter II.
Of course I am. I'm very happy to be here in England with my mother. We're going to work for the good of our country, and amongst other things, I'm going to work on the formation of the Free Yugoslav unit.
That was cool. Huh. Sorry, I have to pause 1 sec. My light went out. All right, let's keep going.
The whole issue of the war will depend
Philippines, right? Right?
upon your ability to save this continent from invasion.
He's got a sick
For
voice.
I feel perfectly certain that as long as these republics are free, they will be able to
Love the
make
tactical pauses here.
all the liberty-living peoples of the world maintain and preserve their own freedom.
Cool. All right, Axis time. All right, let's see. All the European countries plus Japan. On the Axis side, not every country was in the Axis. Oh boy. Yeah, and I'm actually a little upset that he used this. So the reason why is that, you know, Hitler obviously famously is rabble-rousing speeches and him yelling at the top of his lungs and stuff. Though this would often be during the climax of the speech, but there is one piece of audio, one of him actually speaking normally, which is he's on a train with Mannerheim, who was the leader of the Finnish armed forces, and it was secretly recorded by the Finns actually, and it was preserved and it was kept, and it is the only piece of existing footage of him speaking normally. So not in the speech context, just normal everyday conversation. And I'd highly recommend you look it up. It's pretty interesting to hear. It just sounds like a normal guy. He has a pretty deep voice actually, surprisingly. But yeah, just want to point that out. Look it up on YouTube. You can find it. Just Hitler speaking normally, or Hitler Mannerheim train audio. What did he start with? Hold on. I need to listen because, you know, second language here.
Sie reden nicht von den Zehntausenden,
We don't talk about the 10,000.
die Jahr für Jahr
That year over year.
den Gashahn aufdrehen.
The gas handle turn, like aufdrehen?
Nicht weil es ihnen zu gut geht.
Because it doesn't do well.
Können uns unterdrücken.
They could put us under pressure.
Können uns meinetwegen töten.
They could kill us.
Kapitulieren werden wir nicht.
But we will never capitulate. That looks like during an election actually. That might have been either 1930 or 1932. Mussolini. All right. I think if I remember, I think I know what he sounds like.
In cui Roma aveva Cesare il
They use this clip. Yeah, this one's basically become a meme. I mean, look at it. Like it's perfect. Tojo, that's interesting they wouldn't use Hirohito. So Tojo was, I believe, he was the leader of the armed forces, if I remember correctly. Yeah, that's about what I would expect. Yeah, Philippe Pétain, World War I hero, eventually goes to lead Vichy France, and the legacy of Vichy France is a complicated one, to say the least, right? To say the very least. And though he was tried as a traitor, he never actually served any jail time, but I believe he was like 86 or nearing his 90s by the time he would have been actually imprisoned. But yeah, Vichy France is a very, very interesting country. I'll be doing some videos on that coming up later. Yeah, he just sounds like an old French guy.
Les épreuves qu'on nous envoie, ces épreuves sont terribles, mais elles sont d'autant moins terribles que vous n'y prendrez pas part.
You can really hear the difference between him and de Gaulle, right? De Gaulle's got that youthful bravado, and Pétain just, I mean, he was like 75. No, he was even older. I think he was almost 80 at this point. Horthy is another one that talking about controversial figures in history and sort of how they should be thought of and studied in modern times. Horthy could have given away his power, though he was obviously just a regency at the time. Nonetheless, I'm not actually sure what he sounds like, but I don't know, kind of... Let's find out. I don't know how to guess. Okay, well that was really short, but Michael I of Romania. So this is King Michael. He eventually would go and overthrow King Carol, and then would be replaced by the Iron Guard, which is the fascist organization.
Well, I can't quite say definitely now why.
Yeah, he lived a lot of his life in England as well, and he was actually barred from being in Romania, but he did return in the 1990s.
But we're just going on, growing it, and we'll see as things go along what we're going to do.
Yeah, he sounds a little defeated there. But Boris III, killed in 1943, might have been a plot by the Nazis. But if I remember correctly, he learned German growing up, I believe. I think German was his first language. But from talking to my friend MCS, if you're watching this, hi MCS, he speaks Bulgarian with like a super good Bulgarian accent. Yeah.
Ваше Високопреосвещенство, господа, дълбоко съм строгнат от честитките и тъй хубави пожелания, които ми изказахте на днешния празник.
What would I expect? Ah, yes, the Finnish prime minister at the time. Note the necklace here. Interesting character as well. He would take the fall for a lot of the actions that the Finnish government would do during this period. Though arguably Finland really did try and play as best as they could. Really did play the Nazis as best as they could. And for example, they never sent any Jews to concentration camps or anything like this either. So it was really just the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Kansalaiset.
Perfect Finnish. Beautiful.
Rauhaa rakastava
sounds like a
kansamme
Finnish
on
lad.
taas joutunut raan hyökkäyksen kohteeksi. Jälleen kerran on sama vihollinen,
Yep.
joka runsaan puolen vuosituhannen kuluessa lyhyin väliajoin
exactly what I would have
yhteensä
thought.
noin 100 vuotta hävittäen, murskaten ja murhaten käynyt sotia pientä kansaamme vastaan.
And Mannheim, very much celebrated general, was originally made famous in the Finnish Civil War between the Reds and the Whites. So he was the one that led the Whites, and then during the Second World War as well as the Winter War and the Continuation War, which was during the Second World War. There's a massive statue of him just outside of the Helsinki railway station, an equestrian statue of him, very revered figure, considered the father of the nation. Yeah, lots to say about Mannheim. And wait, this is the audio. This is the audio that I was talking about with him and Hitler on the train. Speaking German. Something Herr Kanzler. Tiso. So he was a Catholic priest that would go to lead the Slovak state. Not a, pretty dreadful character.
Jako prezident Slovenskej republiky budem verným strážcom ústavy a zákonov, že budem mať vždy pred očami mravné a hmotné povznesenie ľudu a povediem štát tak, aby sa v ňom uplatňoval Boh.
I would think he would have a bit more of a baritone voice, but hey.
Tak mi Pán Boh pomáha.
Oh, you want to talk about dreadful characters. This, I'll save it for another video. But just horrible.
Mi smo u tom doprinijeli i koju žrtvu. No narod koji nije kadar podnijeti žrtvu, nije kadar niti živjeti.
Oh, cool. Siam here. Well, modern Thailand, but Siam at the time. Cool.
จะเห็นได้ว่าอาณาเขตของเราที่เป็นชายทะเลนั้นมีประมาณทั้งสิ้นยาวไม่น้อยกว่า 1,500 ไมล์มีชนตามชายฝั่งเป็นจำนวนมาก
So he was supposed to be the emperor of China. He was the last emperor of China, and then he was installed in Manchukuo as a Japanese puppet, and the promise was that once Japan won the war, he would be installed as the Chinese emperor. He had a very interesting life, actually. He was a chimney sweeper at one point, despite the fact that he was, according to, one of the not the sons of God, but, touched by God, or so to say, to lead the nation. Yeah, sounds about what I expect. Oh.
Yesterday morning, at 2:41 a.m.
Oh, there you go.
At General Eisenhower's headquarters,
General Jodl, the representative of the
Jodl, whatever.
German High Command, and of Grand Admiral Dönitz, the designated head of the German state, signed the act of unconditional surrender of all German land, sea, and air forces in Europe to the Allied expeditionary forces and simultaneously to the Soviet High Command.
Yep. And so ended the war. And that was that. So Dönitz, so once Hitler committed suicide on April 30th, Goebbels was very shortly in charge, I believe a little bit more than 24 hours, maybe even less. And then Goebbels would go on to take his own life, and then Dönitz was installed, and he was in North Germany at this point, I believe around Hamburg, maybe in Kiel, if I remember correctly. And although he was the leader, he was the last leader of Nazi Germany, the unconditional surrender on the 8th of May meant the absolute disintegration and destruction of Nazi Germany as it was. And with that, the war was won on May 8th, 1945. And so thank you very much for joining me for this one. Hope you found that interesting. Yeah, this is a long one, but like I said, thank you very much for being here. Hope you found it interesting. I thought some of the voices here were cool. Let me know what I missed in the comment section down below. I might have gotten a few dates wrong here and there. Let me know if you have any interesting facts as well. And yeah, happy VE Day. Until the next one, thank you so much for all your support. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.